Months turned into years, and Marcus's restaurant became more than just a dining spot. It transformed into a cornerstone of the community. Families from all walks of life filled its tables, their laughter blending seamlessly with the clinking of glasses and the hum of conversation. The community meal program had grown into a beloved tradition, drawing crowds every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Local schools regularly sent groups of students to participate in cooking workshops, where they learned not only how to prepare meals but also how to dream bigger and bolder. But perhaps the most remarkable change was the atmosphere itself. Gone were the subtle barriers that once made some guests feel out of place. In their stead stood a culture of warmth and inclusivity, fostered by staff who genuinely cared about making everyone feel welcome. Kids like Jamal and Darius weren't anomalies anymore. They were regulars, greeted by name when they walked through the door. Their presence reminded Marcus daily of why he did what he did. One crisp autumn afternoon, years after that fateful day when Marcus first overheard their conversation, a familiar face walked into the restaurant. It was Jamal, now taller and older, dressed in a sharp blazer that hinted at newfound confidence. Beside him stood Darius, wearing an apron covered in flour smudges. They looked nervous yet excited, clutching rolled-up papers in their hands. Marcus greeted them warmly, recognizing the spark of determination in their eyes immediately. "Well, well," he said with a grin, "look who's back. What brings you two here today?" Jamal hesitated for a moment before speaking, his voice steady despite the nerves evident in his posture. "We did it, Mr. Thompson. We opened our own place." Marcus froze, stunned. "You're kidding," he said, though his widening smile betrayed his disbelief. "Nope," Darius chimed in, unfurling one of the papers to reveal a flyer advertising their new restaurant, Dream Spot Eats. The logo featured bright colors and playful fonts, exactly as Jamal had described all those years ago. A cozy, welcoming space designed to make everyone feel at home. "It's small, but it's ours. And we couldn't have done it without your help, or without this place inspiring us." Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes as he studied the flyer. This wasn't just another business opening. It was the culmination of dreams born in the very restaurant he owned, dreams he had almost let slip away until these boys reminded him of what truly mattered. "I'm so proud of you both," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've accomplished something incredible. When can I visit?" "Tonight," Jamal exclaimed, unable to contain his excitement. "We're having our grand opening, and we'd love for you to be there." That evening, Marcus found himself standing outside Dream Spot Eats, marveling at the vibrant sign hanging above the door. Inside, the space buzzed with energy. Colorful murals adorned the walls, depicting scenes of families sharing meals and children laughing together. A chalkboard menu listed affordable dishes alongside quirky illustrations. The room smelled of freshly baked bread and sizzling spices, a testament to the care and effort poured into every detail. As Marcus toured the restaurant, Jamal and Darius introduced him to their team, a diverse group of young people eager to learn and grow. "This is our family," Jamal explained, gesturing proudly at the staff. "Just like you showed us, we want everyone who comes here to feel like they belong." Marcus nodded, overwhelmed with pride. These boys, now young men, had taken his lessons and turned them into something extraordinary. Their restaurant wasn't just a place to eat. It was a beacon of hope, proof that dreams could become reality with hard work, resilience, and support. Later that night, as Marcus sat at a corner table enjoying a plate of soul-warming food, he reflected on how far they'd all come. His own restaurant thrived because of the changes inspired by Jamal and Darius, while their venture proved that the cycle of inspiration never truly ended. One act of kindness, one moment of listening, could ripple outward and create waves of change. Looking around the bustling room, Marcus realized the legacy of hospitality wasn't about buildings or menus. It was about people, about giving others the tools, encouragement, and opportunities to succeed. And as he watched Jamal and Darius greet customers with the same warmth and passion they'd shown years ago, Marcus knew the future was in good hands. In that moment, surrounded by laughter, music, and the aroma of delicious food, Marcus understood something profound. Sometimes, the greatest gift we can give isn't success. It's the chance for someone else to find theirs. And in doing so, we ensure that the spirit of belonging lives on, generation after generation. Weeks later, Marcus stood near the entrance of his restaurant, watching as a group of children filed in with wide eyes and curious smiles. Among them were Jamal and Darius, now accompanied by classmates and chaperones from their school. The energy in the room shifted instantly, brighter, livelier, filled with the kind of excitement that only kids could bring. For Marcus, it felt like the restaurant had come alive in a way he hadn't seen before. When Jamal spotted Marcus standing there, his face lit up with recognition, but then quickly shifted to panic. "Oh no," he whispered loudly to Darius, tugging at his sleeve. "That's the owner. What if he's mad we came here last time?" Darius looked equally nervous but tried to play it cool. "We didn't do anything wrong," he muttered under his breath, though his fidgeting hands betrayed his anxiety. Marcus couldn't help but chuckle softly as he approached them. He crouched down slightly to meet the boys at eye level, his expression warm and inviting. "Hey there," he said with a smile. "You two look familiar." Jamal's cheeks flushed red, and he stammered an apology. "Oh, sorry about coming here before. We didn't mean to sneak in or anything. We just really wanted to see what it was like." Marcus shook his head gently, cutting him off. "No apologies needed," he replied, his voice firm but kind. "In fact, I should be thanking you. You guys reminded me of something important, something I'd forgotten." The boys exchanged confused glances, unsure of what he meant. Marcus straightened up and gestured toward the dining area, where tables had been rearranged to create a welcoming space for the kids. Plates of food were already set out, steam rising from bowls of mac and cheese, chicken tenders, and fresh fruit salads. A banner hung on the wall that read, *Welcome Dreamers*. "This place belongs to all of you now," Marcus continued, looking directly at Jamal and Darius. "And I mean that, not just today, but always. Thanks to you, I've made some changes around here. Changes to make sure everyone feels welcome, no matter who they are or where they come from." The boys blinked in disbelief, their earlier nerves melting into awe. "Really?" Jamal asked cautiously, as if afraid to believe it. "Really," Marcus confirmed, nodding. "You inspired me. Your dreams, your determination, they made me realize this restaurant isn't just about fancy meals or nice decor. It's about people. And I want every person who walks through that door to feel like they belong." Darius grinned, his confidence returning. "So, does this mean we can come back anytime, even if we don't have a lot of money?" Marcus laughed warmly. "Absolutely. In fact, we've started offering special meals during the week that won't break the bank. So yeah, you're always welcome here." The boys beamed, their gratitude shining brighter than any review or accolade Marcus had ever received. As they joined their classmates at the tables, digging into plates piled high with food, Marcus took a step back to observe the scene. Laughter echoed through the room, and conversations buzzed with excitement. Teachers and chaperones thanked him profusely, while kids marveled at the desserts displayed on a nearby cart. But it wasn't just the joy on their faces that moved Marcus. It was the sense of possibility in the air. These kids weren't just enjoying a meal. They were dreaming big. Some talked about becoming chefs. Others imagined owning restaurants of their own. And a few even joked about hiring Marcus as their manager someday. Each dream was unique, yet they all shared one thing in common: hope. As the afternoon wore on, Marcus found himself sitting at a table with Jamal and Darius, sharing stories over slices of chocolate cake. They told him more about their plans, how they envisioned their future restaurant being cozy and colorful, with music playing softly in the background and free art supplies for kids to doodle while waiting for their meals. Marcus listened intently, offering suggestions and encouragement along the way. "You know, he said after a pause, leaning forward slightly. "You two remind me of myself when I was your age. I used to dream about opening a restaurant too. But somewhere along the way, I lost sight of why I started. You helped me remember." Jamal and Darius exchanged proud smiles, clearly thrilled to have made such an impact. For the first time, they didn't seem out of place in the polished dining room. Instead, they radiated confidence, knowing they had earned their spot, not just as customers, but as inspirations. By the end of the day, as the last group of kids waved goodbye and headed home, Marcus felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just a restaurant anymore. It was a hub of dreams, a place where belonging wasn't a privilege but a promise. And thanks to two brave boys who dared to dream, Marcus had rediscovered the heart of hospitality and the power of inclusion. The very next morning, Marcus arrived at his restaurant before sunrise. The streets were still quiet, and the faint glow of dawn painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. He unlocked the door, flipped on the lights, and stood in the middle of the empty dining room, taking it all in. This space, his creation, was about to change. Not with grand renovations or flashy marketing campaigns, but with something far more meaningful: heart. He pulled out the crumpled napkin from his pocket and smoothed it against the counter. His hastily scribbled notes were barely legible, but they didn't need to be perfect. They were a starting point, a spark that would ignite real transformation. First on the list was the community meal program. Marcus envisioned offering hearty, affordable dishes during off-peak hours, giving families like Jamal's and Darius's a chance to enjoy the restaurant without stretching their budgets thin. It wasn't just about lowering prices, it was about sending a message. Asterisk, you belong here, asterisk. Next, he thought about how to involve the community directly. Partnering with local schools seemed like the perfect step. Marcus imagined hosting cooking classes for kids, teaching them not only how to prepare meals but also how to dream big and believe in themselves. He wanted children to walk away knowing that their ideas mattered, and that places like this could someday be theirs too. But Marcus knew these changes wouldn't work unless his staff fully embraced them. So he called an emergency meeting with his management team later that day. When everyone gathered in the back office, confusion flickered across their faces. Emergency meetings were rare, and no one knew what to expect. Marcus wasted no time getting to the point. "I heard something yesterday that shook me," he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Two young boys came into the restaurant, and they reminded me of why I started this business in the first place. They reminded me that we're not just serving food. We're creating experiences. Experiences that should make every single person feel welcome, valued, and respected." He went on to share snippets of Jamal and Darius's conversation, careful not to reveal too many personal details, but emphasizing the impact their words had on him. "These boys saved up for weeks just to sit in our restaurant. Weeks, skipping meals so they could afford it. That's not okay. We can do better." The room fell silent as his words sank in. Some team members exchanged glances, while others stared at the floor, clearly moved. Marcus continued, laying out his plans for the community meal program, school partnerships, and additional staff training sessions focused on inclusivity and empathy. By the end of the meeting, the atmosphere had shifted. What started as confusion turned into determination. Everyone agreed. It was time to reconnect with the restaurant's original mission. Over the following weeks, Marcus worked tirelessly to implement the changes. Flyers announcing the community meal program went up in nearby neighborhoods, inviting families to enjoy discounted dinners every Tuesday and Thursday evening. Local schools responded enthusiastically to the idea of workshops, and soon Marcus found himself standing in front of a group of wide-eyed kids, demonstrating how to fold dough for homemade pizza crusts. Their laughter filled the kitchen, and for the first time in years, Marcus felt truly connected to his work again. One afternoon, as he reviewed feedback from recent guests, Marcus noticed something remarkable. Comments from new customers praised the warmth of the staff and the affordability of the meals. Families who had never considered dining at his restaurant before were now regulars. The changes weren't just improving the business, they were building bridges. Still, Marcus couldn't shake the image of Jamal and Darius sitting by the window, their youthful dreams shining brighter than the polished silverware around them. He decided to take things a step further. Picking up the phone, he reached out to several youth organizations in the area, inviting kids to visit the restaurant, not as customers, but as honored guests. He wanted them to see firsthand that this place was for them, too. As Marcus hung up the phone, he smiled to himself. Change wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't quick. But every small step brought him closer to the vision he'd once held dear. A vision inspired by two brave boys who dared to dream, and who reminded Marcus that sometimes the smallest voices carry the biggest truths. After Jamal and Darius left, Marcus remained seated at his corner table, the weight of their words pressing down on him like a heavy blanket. The restaurant buzzed with its usual energy around him. Servers weaving between tables, laughter filling the air, glasses clinking. But Marcus felt as though he were in a bubble, cut off from everything except the thoughts racing through his mind. He replayed their conversation over and over again, each word etching itself deeper into his conscience. Skipping meals, saving pennies, feeling out of place. These boys had come to his restaurant not because it was convenient or affordable, but because it represented something bigger, a dream, a hope, a chance to prove that they belonged in spaces society often told them were reserved for others. Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the empty seat where the boys had sat just moments ago. Their sketches, their sacrifices, their quiet determination. It all pointed to a truth he couldn't ignore. His restaurant wasn't just a business. It was a reflection of his values, or at least, it was supposed to be. But somewhere along the way, those values had gotten lost. Somewhere along the way, he'd stopped asking himself if everyone who walked through the door truly felt welcome. His mind drifted back to his own childhood. He remembered the cramped apartment he shared with his siblings, the hand-me-down clothes, the days when dinner consisted of toast and canned soup. Back then, he dreamed of opening a restaurant where no one would feel judged or excluded, a place where people could gather, share stories, and leave feeling seen and valued. That dream had driven him for years, pushing him to work harder, take risks, and build something meaningful. But success had changed him. It had brought accolades, profits, and prestige, but also distance. Distance from the very community he once sought to serve. Marcus clenched his fists under the table, frustration bubbling inside him. How had he let this happen? When did creating an exclusive atmosphere become more important than staying true to his roots? The realization stung, but it also lit a fire within him. He couldn't undo the past, but he could shape the future. And that's exactly what he intended to do. For the next hour, Marcus stayed in his seat, jotting notes on a napkin. Ideas poured out of him faster than he could write them down. What if he introduced a community meal program, offering discounted dishes during slower hours so families on tight budgets could enjoy a night out without breaking the bank? What if he partnered with local schools to host workshops for kids interested in cooking or entrepreneurship? What if he trained his staff to go above and beyond in making every customer feel valued, regardless of their background or appearance? Each idea sparked another, and soon the napkin was covered in scribbles. But Marcus knew these weren't just random thoughts. They were promises. Promises to himself, to his customers, and most importantly, to kids like Jamal and Darius. He owed it to them to make things right. As the afternoon sunlight began to fade, casting long shadows across the restaurant floor, Marcus finally stood up. His legs felt stiff from sitting so long, but his mind was alive with purpose. He grabbed the napkin, folded it carefully, and tucked it into his pocket. This was more than just a list of ideas. It was a blueprint for change. On his way out, Marcus stopped by the hostess stand. The young woman greeted him warmly, still unaware that the man in the hoodie and baseball cap was the owner. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice filled with sincerity. For everything. She smiled, puzzled but polite. Of course. Have a great day. Marcus nodded and stepped outside, the cool evening air brushing against his face. As he walked to his car, he glanced back at the restaurant one last time. It looked the same as it always did. Elegant, polished, inviting. But Marcus knew better now. Beneath its shiny surface lay cracks he hadn't noticed before. Cracks that needed fixing. And he was ready to roll up his sleeves and get to work. Because deep down, Marcus understood something crucial. A restaurant wasn't just about food or ambiance. It was about connection. About belonging. About giving people a space where they could dream freely, eat joyfully, and leave feeling like they mattered. And thanks to two brave boys who dared to dream big, Marcus was determined to bring that vision back to life. The conversation between Jamal and Darius took another turn, one that left Marcus gripping the edge of his seat. Their voices grew quieter, almost hesitant, as if they were sharing a secret they weren't sure anyone else would understand. Jamal glanced around again, ensuring no one was within earshot, before leaning closer to his friend. "You know," Jamal began, his tone soft but tinged with frustration, "we had to skip lunch yesterday just to afford this." He gestured toward their nearly empty plates, where remnants of grilled chicken and mashed potatoes remained. "And even then, I wasn't sure we'd have enough for both of us." Darius nodded solemnly, picking up the thread. "Yeah, man. I told my mom I wasn't hungry last night so I could save the money I usually spend on snacks. It's not like she doesn't notice, though. She always asks why I'm eating less. But what am I supposed to say? That I want to sit in a fancy restaurant and pretend it's ours someday?" Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. These boys, kids barely old enough to think about careers or businesses, had gone without food to step foot in his restaurant. The weight of their sacrifice hit him like a freight train. He thought about all the times he complained about minor inconveniences, like long workdays or supply shortages. But here were two young boys who had made real sacrifices just to experience something they believed was out of reach. Jamal sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. "It's crazy, isn't it? We're sitting here, spending every penny we've got, just to feel like we belong. Like maybe, just maybe, people will see us and realize we're not so different from them." His words pierced through Marcus like a sharp blade. Belonging. That simple yet profound concept was at the heart of everything these boys were saying and doing. They weren't here because they craved luxury or status. They were here because they wanted to prove, to themselves and to the world, that they mattered, that they deserved to occupy spaces that society often told them were off-limits. Darius chimed in, his voice firmer now. "But you know what? Even if nobody notices, we know. And that's what counts. This place might be fancy, but it's not better than us. Not one bit." Marcus swallowed hard, his throat dry despite the untouched coffee in front of him. He couldn't help but wonder how many other kids like Jamal and Darius had walked into his restaurant over the years, feeling the same way. How many had second-guessed themselves, wondering if they truly belonged. Worse still, how many had turned away before even stepping inside, deterred by an invisible barrier they assumed existed. The boys sat quietly for a moment, their earlier excitement replaced by a quiet resolve. Jamal stirred his glass of water absent-mindedly, while Darius stared out the window, lost in thought. Marcus noticed how careful they were being, not spilling a drop, not leaving a single crumb behind. It was as if they feared making any mistake, any misstep that might draw unwanted attention. As the reality of their situation settled over him, Marcus found himself reflecting on his own privilege. Growing up poor, he knew what it was like to count pennies and stretch meals, but somewhere along the way, success had insulated him from those struggles. He had forgotten what it felt like to fight for something as basic as a seat at the table, literally and figuratively. He watched as Jamal pulled a small notebook from his jacket pocket and flipped it open. Inside were scribbles and sketches, menus, floor plans, and doodles of smiling customers. "This is our dream," Jamal said proudly, showing Darius a page filled with ideas. One day, we'll have our own place. Better than this, a place where no kid has to skip meals just to walk through the door. Tears welled up in Marcus's eyes, though he quickly blinked them away. These boys weren't just dreaming. They were planning, creating, and believing in a future where they could rewrite the rules. All they needed was someone to give them a chance, to show them that their dreams were valid. When the check arrived, Jamal and Darius counted out their coins carefully, double-checking the total to ensure they hadn't missed anything. Watching them, Marcus realized that this moment wasn't just about two boys having lunch. It was about resilience, determination, and hope. Hope that the world could change, if only people like him were willing to listen. As they gathered their things and prepared to leave, Marcus knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let this moment pass unnoticed. These boys had given him a gift, a glimpse into lives he had overlooked. And now, it was his responsibility to make sure their voices were heard. As the boys continued their conversation, their tone shifted. The excitement in their voices softened, replaced by something more serious. Jamal leaned back in his chair, his youthful confidence momentarily fading. "I still can't believe we're actually here," he said, glancing around the restaurant again. His eyes lingered on a group of well-dressed adults seated nearby, laughing over plates of gourmet food. "This place, it's not like where we usually go, you know. It's fancy, like really fancy." Darius nodded slowly, his earlier enthusiasm tempered by a hint of uncertainty. "Yeah, I get what you mean," he admitted. "It feels kinda weird being here. But that's why we saved up for so long, right? To see if we could do it, to prove to ourselves that we belong here too." Marcus sat motionless, his coffee cup halfway to his lips. Every word these boys spoke felt like a punch to the gut. He had never imagined that kids their age would have to work so hard just to feel like they belonged somewhere. The idea gnawed at him, forcing him to confront uncomfortable truths about his own establishment. Jamal sighed and picked at the edge of his napkin, his voice barely above a whisper now. "I almost didn't want to come today, honestly. What if someone says something, or looks at us funny?" He paused, then added, "You remember last week when we tried going to that cafe downtown? The guy behind the counter acted like we were gonna steal something just because we were looking at the menu." Darius frowned, clearly remembering the incident. "Yeah, I know. That was messed up. But this is different. This place, it feels special. Like, imagine if we owned a restaurant like this someday. A place where nobody gets treated like that. Where everyone feels welcome, no matter who they are, or where they come from." Their words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Marcus felt a mix of emotions swirling inside him: guilt, admiration, and a deep sense of responsibility. These boys weren't just talking about food or decor. They were speaking about dignity, respect, and the power of inclusion. And yet, they carried the weight of experiences that no child should have to endure. Experiences that made them question whether they truly belonged in places like this. The silence between them stretched for a moment before Jamal spoke again, his voice firmer this time. "You're right. We deserve to be here, just as much as anyone else does." He straightened up in his seat, as if trying to convince himself as much as Darius. "And one day, when we open our own restaurant, people will walk in and feel like they matter. No judgment, no weird looks, just good food and good vibes." Darius grinned, clearly buoyed by his friend's renewed determination. "Exactly. And we'll make sure it's affordable too. Not cheap, but fair. So families like ours don't have to save up for weeks just to eat out once." Marcus's chest tightened as he listened. Affordable. Fair. Words he used to value deeply when he first started his business. But somewhere along the way, those ideals had gotten buried under the pressure to succeed, to compete, to appeal to a certain clientele. Had he let those priorities overshadow the very reason he opened restaurants in the first place? The boys fell silent for a moment, sipping their drinks and watching the world outside the window. Cars passed by. Pedestrians strolled down the sidewalk, and life moved on as usual. But inside the restaurant, Marcus felt like time had stopped. He couldn't shake the feeling that these boys had unknowingly handed him a mirror, one that reflected not only his successes, but also his failures. He wanted to say something, to introduce himself, and thank them for sharing their dreams. But he held back, knowing that this wasn't the moment. Instead, he resolved to keep listening, to hear every word they had to offer. Because somewhere in their conversation lay the answers he'd been searching for, the key to making his restaurant a place where everyone truly belonged. And as the afternoon sunlight bathed the room in golden hues, Marcus realized that these two boys weren't just customers. They were teachers, showing him how to rediscover the heart of hospitality, a lesson he desperately needed to learn. The two boys sat by the window, their faces lit up by the soft afternoon sunlight streaming through the glass. They weren't loud or disruptive. In fact, they were quieter than most of the other patrons. But there was something magnetic about their energy. They laughed softly, occasionally glancing around as if to make sure no one was watching them too closely. Marcus couldn't help but notice how out of place they seemed in this polished, upscale restaurant. The sleek leather chairs and pristine white tablecloths felt worlds away from the neighborhoods he imagined they came from. One of the boys leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. "You really think we can pull this off?" he asked, his voice tinged with both excitement and doubt. His friend nodded eagerly, a wide grin spreading across his face. "Of course we can. I told you, Jamal. We've got this. We just need to save more money. And then we'll have our own spot. Just like this one." Marcus's ears perked up at the mention of saving money. He tilted his head slightly, pretending to focus on his phone while eavesdropping on their conversation. Saving money. For what? What were these kids planning that involved a place like this? His curiosity deepened as he listened closer. Jamal, the boy who had spoken first, hesitated for a moment before replying. "I don't know, Darius. This feels fancy. Like, maybe it's not for people like us." His words hung heavy in the air, even though he said them quietly. Darius shook his head firmly, clearly unwilling to let his friend's doubts take hold. "That's why we're doing it," he replied, his tone resolute. "So people like us can have places like this. Imagine walking into a restaurant where everyone feels welcome, no matter what they look like or where they come from. That's what I want." Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. These boys were dreaming big, bigger than he ever expected. Their vision wasn't about wealth or fame. It was about belonging, about creating spaces where people didn't feel judged or excluded. It struck him hard because, despite all his efforts to build welcoming restaurants, he now wondered if he'd failed to live up to that ideal himself. The boys continued talking, their voices growing more animated as they shared ideas. Jamal described how he wanted the walls painted bright colors, warm and inviting, so customers would feel like they were stepping into someone's home. Darius chimed in, suggesting a menu filled with comfort foods that reminded people of family dinners. "And we wouldn't care if someone wore ripped jeans or sneakers," he added with a laugh. "As long as they're happy, that's all that matters." Their enthusiasm was infectious, and Marcus found himself smiling despite the weight of their words. These kids weren't just dreaming, they were planning. They spoke with such conviction, such hope, that it made Marcus reflect on his own journey. When he was younger, he had dreamed of opening a restaurant too. Back then, his goal wasn't to impress people or make a name for himself. It was to create a space where anyone could walk in and feel valued. Somewhere along the way, though, things had changed. Success had brought compromises, and the idea of inclusivity had taken a backseat to profits and prestige. As the boys paused to sip their drinks, Marcus noticed something else. The way they looked around the room. Their eyes darted nervously toward the other tables, checking to see if anyone was paying attention to them. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it spoke volumes. They were aware of their surroundings in a way that suggested they didn't quite believe they belonged here. Marcus's heart sank. Here were two young boys, full of dreams and determination, yet feeling out of place in a public space, a space that should have been open to everyone. He realized that his restaurant, which he had always believed was accessible and welcoming, might unintentionally be sending the opposite message. The thought weighed heavily on him, and he knew he needed to hear more. There was still something missing, something deeper beneath their words that he hadn't uncovered yet. And as the boys resumed their conversation, Marcus leaned in just a little bit closer, ready to listen. Marcus Thompson was a man who loved food, people, and the stories they brought with them. He had built his life around creating restaurants that felt like home to anyone who walked through the door. His newest restaurant, located in the heart of Chicago, was no exception. At least, that's what he thought. It was sleek, modern, and buzzing with energy every night of the week. People raved about the food, the ambience, and the service. But lately, Marcus had started hearing something else. Whispers that troubled him. Some customers said the restaurant didn't feel welcoming to everyone. A few mentioned it seemed exclusive, like it catered only to a certain crowd. At first, Marcus brushed it off. After all, his intentions were good. He worked hard to hire diverse staff, kept the menu affordable for an upscale eatery, and even hosted charity events. But deep down, he couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that maybe there was some truth to those whispers. Maybe he wasn't seeing the full picture. One quiet afternoon, Marcus decided to take matters into his own hands. Instead of showing up at the restaurant in his usual sharp suit, tie perfectly knotted, and air of authority, he chose to blend in. He pulled on a pair of old jeans, a faded hoodie, and a baseball cap that hid his neatly trimmed hair. For once, he wanted to see his restaurant not as the owner but as just another customer. When he stepped inside, no one gave him a second glance. The hostess greeted him politely but didn't recognize him. She led him to a small corner table tucked away from the main dining area. Sitting there, Marcus felt strangely invisible and oddly free. From this vantage point, he could observe everything. The way servers moved between tables, the laughter of families sharing meals, the clinking of glasses during toasts. He watched how people interacted with each other and with the staff. And he listened. The restaurant was never completely silent. There was always a low hum of conversation, music playing softly in the background, and the occasional burst of laughter. But today, something different caught his ear. Over the gentle murmur of voices, he heard two boys talking animatedly near the window. They looked young, probably around 12 or 13, and dressed in clothes that seemed slightly too big for their frames. One wore sneakers with scuffed toes, while the other's jacket had a tiny tear near the sleeve. Neither looked like the typical patrons of this upscale spot. Curious, Marcus leaned back in his chair, pretending to scroll through his phone while keeping one ear tuned to their conversation. These boys didn't belong here, or so it seemed at first glance. Yet there they were, sitting by the window, soaking in the atmosphere of a place that likely cost more than either of them could afford on their own. Marcus wondered why they were here and what they were saying. Little did he know, their words would shake him to his core. As he sat there, blending into the background, Marcus realized this might be the moment he'd been waiting for, the chance to truly understand what people thought about his restaurant. Not the polished reviews online or the glowing comments from friends, but the raw, unfiltered truth. And these two boys, they were about to give him exactly that.